Hi everyone, this is William from the Headphone Experience, and I'm here tonight with my first impressions of the Shanling ET3 CD Transport. And I've only done a few reviews of CD players or CD transports. The last one I did was maybe a year and a half ago of the SMSL PL200 CD player, and I've been needing a new CD transport for quite a while. The SMSL, that was a loaner that I returned, and my primary transport for the last several years, or in fact since I've been doing reviews, has been a Cambridge Audio 540C CD player, but I used it entirely as a CD transport using the digital outputs running into various stacks. But anyway, had that since about 2012, I believe, maybe 2010. So it was, I guess, about 15 years old, and it was great for a long, long time, but it was starting to have some issues, and it was time to retire it. And been looking for a CD transport, and this is the one I decided on. And don't regret that decision at all. I've had this for about 3 months now, and I am extremely happy with it. And so I thought I'd throw a review out here. And like I said, I don't do a whole lot of CD player reviews, primarily headphones, DACs, things like that, headphone amps. But I thought I'd throw this into the mix. So anyway, unlike the rest of the equipment I've reviewed that's usually loaned to me, I actually purchased this from Music Direct, and it currently sells for $899 in US dollars. And I bought this as I think it was an open box version. Maybe it was a demo, but anyway, I saved about $150 by doing that, and it arrived in brand new condition, and I've had absolutely no issues with it. So, the first thing I wanted to say is, well, before I get to this, I just wanted to mention that I had to take a couple weeks off from reviewing. Those of you that watch my channel know that this isn't my full-time job. I don't make enough money from YouTube by a long shot to pay my bills, so I run a small lawn care business that's what I've been doing for a living for 23 years now. Well, anyway, I've been shopping for a new primary mower for my lawn care business, and I spent the last couple of weeks out looking at mowers, and had to work out some financing, and picked up a new mower last week on Wednesday, I believe, and then spent the day Thursday prepping it, getting it ready to go out and mow, and then mowed on Friday and Saturday, mowed 5 yards with it so far, my own and 4 other kind of smallish yards. But I ended up with a Bad Boy Rogue, sort of the top of the line of the Bad Boy zero turns. It's a 72-inch deck and has a 38.5 horsepower Kawasaki EFI engine in it. And the thing's a beast, weighs over 1,600 pounds dry. Then you add 13 gallons of gas to that, and my 205 pounds, and now you're up over 1,900 pounds, pushing 2,000. So it is a beast of a mower, but I'm happy with it so far. I've only got 2.3 hours on it, but I'm really liking it so far. Unfortunately, we're near the end of the mowing season here, so I've only got maybe 6 or 8 yards to mow with it yet this year. I need to mulch leaves, and then I've got to put it away for the winter, and that's going to be tough, but by buying it end of the season, I got a couple $1,000s off on the price and really good finance rates. So that's why I decided to pull the trigger with that at this time. So anyway, enough about that. Let's get back to this. This is the Shanling ET3 CD Transport. Currently sells for $8.99, and I do want to point out that this is a transport only. This is not a CD player, and if you don't know the difference, a CD player has a built-in DAC which allows it to put out an analog signal, so all you have to do is plug it into a headphone amp or a speaker amp or something like that, and you can listen to it. The difference is a transport only puts out a digital signal, so you have to run that digital signal through a DAC, digital to analog converter, to convert it into analog before you can plug it into headphone amp or speaker amp. And that's exactly what I needed. I needed a CD transport because I review a lot of DACs and I needed a source to review my DACs. So that's why I needed this. And if you've been watching my channel for what have I been on, 7 years now, about 350 videos, all my reviews are done with CDs. My source is always CDs, or it's my desktop computer, which I ripped CDs to my computer in lossless WAV or WAV format and use it that way. But anyway, all my listening comes from CDs. I love CDs. I'm not into streaming. I'm not into, anything really but CDs. Maybe someday I'll get into vinyl again. I was into it many years ago, but I don't currently have a good turntable or turntable, yeah, a phono amplifier, preamplifier. I don't have that stuff. I do have about maybe 80 albums or so and most of them are probably about 30 to 40 years old. But anyway, let's get back to this CD transport. So this is a top-loading CD transport, which you can see here. I'll tip it up. And I went with that because part of the problem I had with the Cambridge Audio after all these years is the belt that opens and closes the door did snap probably 3-4 times in those 15 years, and I had to open it up and replace the belt, which was not that big a deal, but eventually towards the end I was having problems with it opening and closing, and with the top load you don't ever have to worry about that. There's nothing to wear out there. This unit uses a Philips CD drive, and it uses a Sanyo optical head to read the CDs. It fully unfolds MQA files from your CD, which you have to then transfer that digital signal to a MQA capable DAC to take advantage of those MQA files. And I do not have any MQA CDs, and there's probably only half a dozen of you out there that actually do. They never became very popular. So kind of a feature that not many are really going to care about, and I can't tell you how it performs because, like I said, I've got maybe about 500 CDs, but I don't have any MQA CDs. So this is also capable of wireless Wi-Fi streaming. I have never been into streaming, so I'm probably not going to cover that part of this. I'm going to talk about this as a CD transport. I will probably eventually do a full review on this, and if I do try it as a streamer during that time between now and then, I will talk about it as a streamer, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen. Like I said, I've just really had no desire to ever get into streaming. I've been very happy with the sound of CDs. This is also a Bluetooth receiver. It can receive a Bluetooth signal from your phone or whatever and play that through this. And it does have upsampling capability. This will upsample your CDs or your USB. It has a USB input, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Or your streaming, your Wi-Fi wireless streaming. It will upsample those up to 768 PCM, which is kilohertz per second, or yeah, 768 kilohertz PCM, or a DSD 512 signal. And I'll talk about that when I talk about the sound of this in a few minutes. It does have one digital input, as I mentioned, and it has 5 digital outputs. And that's a big part of the reason I chose this unit. My old Cambridge Audio, it was a CD player, so it only had your 2 digital outputs, which is standard, your optical and your coax. This has 5 digital outputs, which like I said, that's something I really needed and a big part of the reason I went with this. So it has I squared S output, which I've never had anything with an I squared output. I've reviewed some DACs with I squared S inputs. So that's why I really wanted that feature on my CD transport. And through the I squared S output, it will go all the way up to PCM 768 or DSD 512. This also has optical coax and AES, which is basically a 3-pin full-size XLR plug. And through those, the output of this is up to PCM 192 or DSD 64, I think it was. I wrote it down on my notes, but I think I have it wrong. Anyway, I think it goes up to DSD 64 from the optical coax and AES outputs. And then the USB output of this goes all the way up to USB, goes up to 768 PCM or 512 DSD once again. I did mention this does have a USB input, which you can use, like, run this from your computer, your USB into this. I did want to mention, though, that the upsampling capability of this does not work from the USB output for some reason. If you put a USB signal into this, like from your computer that's high resolution, it will pass that through, but it won't upsample anything that's coming out of the USB output. So the USB output will just be your standard 44.1 kilohertz. I did want to mention that. I'm not sure why that is. The disc capabilities of this, the CDs that it can play are your regular CDs, your CDRs, your CDRWs, and MQA CDs. This has the screen on the front of it is a round Motorola IPS display that is 320 by 290 resolution. That would be pixels, 320. I'm not sure which is the width and which is the height. This unit comes with the disc cover, which is glass and sort of a dark tinted glass. You can still see through it and see the CDs in it. And I did want to mention that unlike the SMSL was also a top loader, also had a cover on it. It was an aluminum cover. But if you get the PL200 Transport, that has a glass cover you can see through. But the SMSLs is 2 pieces. You have a little puck you have to set on top of the CD, and then you put the cover on, which is kind of a hassle because if you have the CD in one hand, you take the lid off, now you got to take the puck off, so you have to set something down unless you have 3 hands. So I like this better. It's just one thing, so I've got my other hand to put the CD in. Put this on 1 step instead of 2, getting it going. This also comes with a remote control, and it comes with the power cable to power this unit. So I'll try to hold this up and show it to you a little bit. And on front here, right in the middle would be where your round display screen is. And then you've got one knob here that it's a push button. You push it and long hold it to turn the unit on or off. And then you push it a short hold and it goes in your menus. Then you can scroll through your menus, and this thing has a lot of things you can do through the menu, including upsampling, and you have multiple choices In PCM, you have multiple choices in DSD, or you can set it to non-oversampling or upsampling where it doesn't change it and just sends your original signal out to your DAC directly from your CD. It's really nice. The menus are pretty simple on this and easy to use. Then you've got your standard CD player controls or CD transport, except for this one. The one here is your input, which you can switch between CD, Bluetooth, or streaming. And then you've got your stop button here, your pause play button, your fast forward, rewind, or, set your track forward or back. And about the only complaint I have with this is the remote. I think, what did I do with the remote? It's actually sitting over here somewhere. Here it is. Okay. The remote does a lot of things, but the only complaint I have is it does not have numbers on it, so you can go directly to a track. You do have to scroll through, through your tracks. But one thing that does help is when you get to the last track of the CD, you can scroll back to the first, just one click to get back to the first track on the CD. You don't have to go all the way backwards or stop it and restart it to get back to track one. So otherwise, you can control pretty much everything from this. It's a pretty, it's nothing fancy. It's just made out of plastic, but it does function well. So then the back of this, I wanted to show you, you've got your USB input, then you've got your USB output, and you've got, let's see, here's your AES, here's your optical, here's your coax input, and then, your I2S is at the bottom here. And I'll talk about that a little more in a few minutes. Then you've got your antenna here for, I guess, your Bluetooth and your streaming. Probably it's Wi-Fi streaming, so I guess that needs an antenna, so it uses the same one here. Then you've got your power switch on the back here, and you can leave this on and shut the unit off with the knob on the front by pushing it, and it stays in standby mode, or you can turn it off completely back here. Then your 120 volt AC input here. I didn't write down the size and weight of this, but it is about 7 inches wide. It's about 10 inches from front to back. It's about 2 inches high. And I'm guessing, like I said, I didn't weigh it, probably weighs about 5 pounds. It's very substantial. It has good weight to it, but not overly heavy. And I did want to mention that the enclosure is a machined piece of aluminum with no seams in it. I guess the only way to get into it is through the back here, or possibly, let me take this cover off so I don't drop it. But on the bottom here, it does have a plate that looks like it can be removed, but there's no screws, so they might be under these feet here. If you did have to get into it for some reason. This is what it looks like with the cover off the inside. And anyway, so before I get into, and I'm not really going to talk about the sound of this, because it is my belief that any CD transport, all CD transports are going to pretty much sound the same as long as they're properly reading the CD. I mean, if they're not reading the CD correctly, then you're going to have issues. Or if it's adding a lot of jitter, but today with modern DACs that can remove almost any amount of jitter, jitter isn't as much as a factor. So now when you're using a good quality DAC, I don't think the transport is really going to change the sound. That's just my personal opinion. I think they're all going to sound pretty much the same running into a good quality DAC. Like I said, as long as they're properly reading the CD. So I've mentioned already that this has 5 digital outputs, and I will mention that you can use up to 4 at the same time. You can use the I2S the AES, the coax, and optical outputs all at the same time. So you can run up to 4 DACs off of this at one time, and which is great for comparing DACs back and forth. Or if you're comparing headphones or whatever, you've got 4 outputs that can be used at the same time. So pretty much everything on this rack, and you can only see half of it right now, is all hooked up to this CD transport. And currently, well, not at this second, but before I took it down and put it here on the table, I had the I2S hooked up to my Audio GD R8 MK2 R2R DAC. And I had the AES output of this hooked to the topping D70 MQA. That does have a I2S input. I have not tried it, but I've been told that the Shanling CD Transport, that it is not compatible with topping DACs, that it doesn't match up. There is no standard right now as far as outputs and inputs of the wiring of the I2S connections. I guess the system or the design or layout or whatever that PS Audio is using, and they were the one, my understanding is PS Audio was the first to develop I2S and connections, inputs and outputs. And the wiring pattern they're using is sort of becoming the standard, and that is what this uses. I've been told this will work with PS Audio, and it does work with the Audio GD R8 MK2. I did want to mention, though, that when I ran the I2S from this to the Audio GD, a couple of the different upsampling rates weren't working correctly. There was some noise, and I was using a 4K rated HDMI cable. I switched to an 8K HDMI cable, and then everything was fine. All of the upsampling rates were clean with no background noise. Okay, but what happened when I first took this up to the Audio GD R8, the 2 channels left and right were reversed, but you can go into the menu on this and reverse the left and right channels if that's an issue. You go into the I2S menu and you can reverse the 2. So it ended up working fine. Like I said, I haven't tried it with the topping D70. I've been told they're not compatible. I had the coax hooked up to the Hi-Fi Man Serenade and the optical to the Burson Conductor 3 reference. There's also a USB output on this, and I have tried it. I used it with the FIO K11 R2R DAC. Worked just great, but when you're using the USB output of this, it shuts off the other 4. So you cannot use all 5 at the same time. If you're using USB, that's the only one you can use. But if you don't use USB, you can run all 4 of the other outputs at the same time. So as far as comparisons, all I can really compare this to is my Cambridge Audio 540 CD player and the SL PL200 CD player that I reviewed maybe a year and a half ago. Okay, so like I said, I'm not really going to try to talk about the sound of this because to me, the Cambridge Audio, the SMSL, this all sound the same running through a good DAC. So I'm not even going to make an issue out of that. So what I'm going to talk about is the performance of this. So I'm going to start with loading a disc in it and how quick it reads it. Okay. My Cambridge Audio would do a pretty good job. If it was a store-bought CD, it would read it in a couple of seconds, be ready to play. With a CD-RW that I ripped from my computer, it would take a little longer, maybe 10 seconds. Okay, the SMSL PL200 took about 10 seconds to read a store-bought CD, and if you put a CD RW, I think that stands for rewrite, it would take a long time, like maybe 30 seconds to read it before it was ready to play. This one is like almost instant with a store-bought CD, like 1 second, and about 2 seconds with a CD-RW. This is the fastest of any player I've used, and I'm talking like players that multi-disc players like Blu-ray, DVD, CD, or whatever. Of all the players I've used, this one loads and reads it faster than any I've ever used before. Okay, next I want to talk about disc tracking, and what I mean by that, the ability for this to read a less than perfect CD. I've got a lot of CDs that are 35, 40 years old from the 80s, and the Cambridge Audio did a decent job of reading some of the older, some of the CDs that were a little scratched up. It did a pretty good job, but out of my 500 CDs, there was maybe 10% of them that it had some problems, had occasional skips, things like that. Okay, the SMSL PL200 that I reviewed, and I considered, instead of buying this, buying the SMSL PL200T, which is a transport only and has 4 digital outputs, and it's a couple $100 less than this. And I considered that, but I had a lot of problem with the PL200 CD player playing less than perfect CDs. If it was a brand new perfect CD, played them just fine. But when I started getting out my older CDs, it had a lot of issues with not wanting to track, not wanting to play. Sometimes I couldn't even read them to start playing. And older CDs that might have been scratched a little bit or whatever had a lot of problems. And out of my 500 CDs, that PL200 probably couldn't play a third of those CDs all the way through without skipping at some point. Okay, so my go-to, if I wanted to listen to an old CD from the 80s or something that was scratched up, I primarily went with I have a 20-year-old Sony DVD player that'll play anything. It'll play almost any CD without skipping, and that was my go-to, and this thing is just as good or better. I have only run into 2 CDs in like 3 months that this skipped in one place, and every other player, including my CD or Sony DVD player, will skip at that same point. So this is incredible. The best I've heard at tracking without skipping. Okay, the upsampling modes on this, it does make an obvious difference in the sound. The DSD is very smooth and extremely free of grain, but it's a little bit soft sounding. The PCM, especially at the higher rates, has a little bit more of a sharper focus to it, and I actually prefer the higher level PCM upsamplings. But you can run this without upsampling at all, and it sounds great. I think I mentioned the controls and menu on this are very easy to read. I love the fact that it has 4 digital outputs that you can use at the same time. I haven't tried this as a streamer or Bluetooth. If I do that, I'll do an update or a full review on this and let you know how that works out. So basically, I can highly recommend this. It is an outstanding CD transport, and I'm 100% happy. And I even spent my own money on this, and I'm still 100% happy with this as a CD transport. I love it. So highly recommend it if that's what you need. I can't tell you if it's a good streamer or good at Bluetooth. I'm just not into Bluetooth. Never have been, probably never will be. So anyway, highly recommended as a CD transport, but remember, this is only a transport, not a player, and I'm going to wrap it up with that. Once again, this is William from the Headphone Experience. If this video helped you, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my channel. And the Headphone Experience on Facebook is up to 38.1 thousand members. Like to see you all over there. Please join us. Once again, thanks for watching my video.